Okay. There will be a lot of information, and we will also open up the Q&A section. So if you have any questions, write them in there and we will address them at the end, if not cover them during the course of the presentation. Thank you for attending, and I will now turn it over to Cindy Rivera, our Director of School Counseling.
Hi, everybody. I wish I could see you, but nice that you've joined us. We've done this meeting with the PFA, thank you very much, every year around this time to really just talk about next steps as you move into the summer for your juniors and get ready for writing applications and making plans. It became a little bit of a bigger program last year as the whole world turned upside down, and we worried that the plans we usually talk about would no longer apply. So it did become a little bit of a bigger program. What we found, though, is that although there are still many moving parts and new ways to research colleges, much of the process for applying to college has not changed. Whether we're in a pandemic or not, applications still have deadlines. Research about colleges needs to happen. Testing may still be advisable for most students, and selectivity remains high and is getting higher for the top 50 or so colleges in the country. So that's been true every year, as least as long as I've been in the business here, which is a few years at this point. It's true, there's still many unknowns. And we both have no control over much of this process, which is really difficult to manage when you've had so much control over your children in the years past. And the news is constantly changing. And so it does add a lot of angst to the process. Kids have only begun to return to their activities after school. Zoom meetings are still dominating our days, and colleges are not yet fully open for visits for a lot of students. On the other hand, last year demonstrated the resiliency and the creativity of our students, and they seem to learn more about themselves than ever before. The slower pace, time away from their maddening schedules had its benefits that we're now encouraging them to reflect on. So let's not forget that and remind our kids that it was not a lost year, as we hear so often. Perhaps we could even reframe it as a found year, where your kids learn something about themselves as learners and as people. And this will be so important as they look to for colleges and start applying and representing themselves as they move forward. So many things have not changed, and that's what we're going to talk about today in what college admissions looks like right now. There's a lot you can do right now, and that's what we're going to focus. But first, let me talk a little bit about what we know so far about admissions this year. Seniors are only beginning to put all their outcomes in, so we don't have the full picture just yet. They're going to have everything in the next few weeks, and that'll give you a lot of information in Naviance about how we did this year. As I'm sure you've heard, applications rose exponentially this year, and colleges had difficulty meeting their own deadlines for making decisions. The most competitive colleges turned down 10 highly qualified students for every one that they accepted. It's ridiculous what we heard this year. Harvard rejected 97% of its applicants. Princeton and MIT, 96%. UCLA had more than 140,000 applications for just 8,000 spots. Our own current seniors also applied to more schools than usual. And I think their thought being that since so many schools didn't require SATs or ACTs, and that there were so many questions about who would even be applying to college, that their chances were going to be better for acceptance. It didn't work out that way. The most selective colleges still took our top students, and they did not admit students whom they normally would not admit. So if you hear that it was a tough year for our seniors, in the end, there were a few surprises for us as counselors. UCLA still only accepted students who had better than a 98 average. BC still looked for our top kids and denied all those that were giving it a shot. And of course, as every year, some colleges had wonky decisions not in line with our statistics. So when that happens, we always call those schools, call the reps, speak to them about what their process was to understand why it was a little bit different for them. Overall, it's good to keep in mind the national admissions rate among all colleges is still well over 50%. So there's good news to be had there. It's still good news too that colleges know and trust the education that our students in New Canaan have received and are still receiving. They know historically how well our students do at their schools. And that came into play this year as they made decisions for our colleges, our kids. I'm going to start by talking about testing a little bit. Many colleges will still be test optional next year. A large number of them went to test optional, which meant that you don't have to send scores this year because it was so hard for kids to sit for an SAT or an ACT this year. And they're going to continue that practice for next year. That information is slowly being released now as colleges decide for themselves what they want to do. The stats that we've seen show that many colleges accepted a good portion of their students without scores, and this is what they're using to inform their decisions moving forward. As far as we can see, though, the SAT and the ACT started taking a back seat in admissions before the pandemic. It was already happening as they realized that test scores had little to do with a student's success at their schools and more to do with being a barrier to those who could not afford to prep for them in the way that others are able to. I actually had the fortunate opportunity to sit in on a live admissions committee when I visited a highly selective college before the pandemic when we traveled. And it was interesting to see that although a test score was listed, it was always a very minor piece of it. It was up in their screen in a little corner what the scores were, but it was never discussed as part of the determination to accept a student or not. Even then, it was not a large piece of the puzzle, and that's even more true now. So keep that in mind when planning and preparing or having your child prepare for testing. It should not take over your child's life. We still recommend that students take one or the other test, take an ACT or an SAT 2 times only, possibly a third, but only if in one of the first 2 there was a blip, i.e. the student didn't feel well that day, something upset them and they didn't get a good night's sleep the night before, something like that. There's little reason to test more than that. Scores tend not to improve the more you do them, and students become less motivated as they take them over and over. So think in terms of twice. And let it go at that. This spring, we've not canceled any testing as we had to last year, and it doesn't look like we're going to need to moving forward so far. We'll see. The Connecticut school testing went on as scheduled this month, so most students already have a test under the belt. You can see on the slide of the test dates, and the asterisk shows when we offer them at NCHS. I also just want to note that although there are SATs and ACTs offered, dates are offered over the summer, finding some place to take them is difficult, as all the high schools usually are closed over the summer and aren't running them. So that I wouldn't count on one of those dates. It may be difficult to find a seat. Focus more on taking the tests in June, and then if needed in October, November, December, anytime like that. November and December are available if you're not applying early. So when not to test, this is something to discuss with your child's counselor. Generally speaking, if schools on your list have all said they are score optional, and your child has a GPA commensurate with the averages of our college stats in Naviance, again, use Naviance, please, then you could consider not testing at all. If your child has always been a good test taker and was hoping to bolster their application with scores, then you may look to take a test. But some schools will say that, on the other hand, if you had an opportunity to test, they'd like to see your scores. So it's all over the place as always. You have to do your research on these schools as these policies are changing daily. And that's why we usually say, take a test just to have one under your belt in case you need it as you move forward. Please continue to use the Naviance stats and look at the scattergrams with your child to understand their chances of getting in. The GPAs and test scores seem to be similar in most cases this year as in previous years. Start with the list you've developed with your child's counselor, do the research. Linda will talk a little bit more about this in a little bit. And then one other thing I wanted to talk about applying early. This is something, again, to discuss with your counselor in the fall, especially if you're considering early decision, which is binding if your child's accepted. So there's a lot that goes into that decision. So you really want to have a bigger discussion about it. It may be a good option for many kids. If a student fits the profile of the college they're applying to, and it's a top choice for them, they may have a good chance of being accepted in an early round. But do not expect that your child will get in if they're not at least in the average, within the averages that the school has for us. For example, if your child has a 92 average, they've done well here, obviously, but do not expect that if they apply early, they will get in. If when you look at Naviance, the average for the school is 98 to 100, or the kids had 103 averages, a 92 is probably not going to do it. On the other hand, if your child has a 91 average and the school average is a 92, applying early may benefit the child. So just keep that in mind. You don't get a huge advantage in applying early. There also continue to be many applications and acceptances in the regular round, so it's not necessary to apply early everywhere. The difficult part when you apply in the regular round, it's waiting until the spring to hear from schools, and that can be pretty nerve-wracking. Okay, that's it for me for now. So Sue Carroll is going to take it from here, and then we'll come back and talk about summer stuff and questions at a later point. Sue?
Hey, great. Thanks, Cindy. Good morning, everybody. I'm coming to you live from the College and Career Center. So my tech setup is a little bit different, but this is where we happily hosted 88 colleges this year. I hate the word pivot, but we did a lot of pivoting when we found out that we couldn't have any visitors in the school. So what we did is we went through Naviance and picked out, at this case, 88 of the most popular schools that our students intended to apply. And we invited them to Zoom visit with us. They were thrilled at this notion. I had maybe 12 kids in here, some students, because the Wi-Fi is so good in the parking lot, they did the college visit in the parking lot, they were in the hallway, they were in the library. But we had a really good experience with the block schedule. We scheduled these visits at the beginning of each block so that students were not missing an entire class. And so we were very happy with the schools accepting our invitation. We recorded each and every one of those visits because we had control over the Zoom, and therefore students who were unable to attend were able to look at the visit afterwards. So the students were able to fill out demonstrated interest cards during the first few minutes of each of these visits. We would put a link on the screen, and it seemed to go very, very well. So we will then, based on whether we can have visitors or not in the school, probably pivot again to figure out how to do it for your juniors. But rest assured, senior year fall, there will be college visits at New Canaan High School. The other thing that I wanted to touch on is something that I think should be happening at around your dining room table maybe this summer. I think there should be a serious conversation about how you will pay for college. I think that you will do your children a disservice if you don't include them in this conversation, even if you intend to write out a check, pay full freight without any issues. On the bridge to adulthood, how someone pays for college is an important conversation that they need to know and understand. And if it's going to play a part in the colleges they will choose, then I think it's especially important. Every college website by law has to have something on the financial aid page called a net price calculator. The net price is the amount that you pay to an institution after subtracting all scholarships and grants. And of course, scholarships and grants is money that the college is giving you or an outside source is giving you that you don't have to pay back, as opposed to loans, of course, that you are paying back with interest. So you need to think about your ability for a private college, for example. Colgate is at $72,000 a year. Think about writing a check for $35,000 a semester. That is a daunting task, I think. Even UConn is $32,000 a year. If you were to add sorority, fraternity dues, travel expenses, the price just keeps going up and up. To help you figure all of this out, we will have, as we always do, a financial aid night in October. I suggest that you come. Even if you are not seeking financial aid from a school, most jobs on campus, for example, are done through a financial aid office. So if your child is offered a lab assistant's job in the biology department, which would be a great thing for them to do when they got on campus, they would have needed to fill out a FAFSA. You would have had to complete the FAFSA so that they could even work on campus. So financial aid night will be held in October. And again, you should at this point register with FastWeb. Your students should register with FastWeb or Merit Aid. We have a slide coming up about those later. Those are national clearinghouses for scholarships. And it will take a few essays to be written, but it's a worthwhile way of your child spending some time. Local scholarships, such as the New Canaan High School Scholarship, Sapienza, the Rotary Club, those will all be available to your students in the second semester of senior year. As the second semester begins, we will get the word out to you. The Common App also has a great amount of links for different financial aid resources. So I invite you to take advantage of those resources as well. But again, before your child starts their first application, have that serious conversation. Tell them how you've saved for this so that they understand really the investment that you're about to make in their future. Every college financial aid officer will be happy to chat with you. That's what they're there for before you even hit send on the application. So if you have questions, they are an excellent resource. Again, have that conversation with your child. Linda's going to tell you a little bit about the application itself. Linda?
Thanks, Sue. Hello, junior parents. We haven't seen you since we had the junior appointments with your child. It seems like a long time ago, and certainly it's been a long time since you've all been able to come into the building. So we look forward to that day, hopefully next year. So what's happening with your juniors right now? After the junior appointment, your school counselor was entering college suggestions into your student's account in Naviance, in the colleges I'm thinking about. And this is our working draft document where students will put colleges in, school counselors will put suggestions, and as the year goes on, they refine that list and adjust it as your child's interests come into greater focus. So the colleges I'm thinking about in Naviance is really our go-to, so that we're all on the same page about what a student would like. We've been hearing from some of our juniors that recently they've been able to visit college campuses around the country. There has been some movement in the direction of the schools opening their doors, and while there's not a lot of in-person campus tours and info sessions at this point, but students and parents have been able to do some self-guided tours. We're hoping that maybe after their current college students leave for the semester, the schools will be a little bit more willing to welcome visitors back to their campus. So I think it's best to just keep checking their websites. Sometimes the campus tours open up, but they probably fill up quickly, but it just is a good practice to just keep checking the website. So, what happens really if your family's not able to visit, at this point in time, or the campus is, the college is far across the country and you're not willing to get on a plane to go see the campus, or the campus is not even open. Well, colleges have really stepped up their virtual events. They really perfected their game this year with this application system season. Everything was done by Zoom for the current seniors. And virtual tours have been really proven to be really vital to our current seniors. We all have seniors that have never even stepped foot on their attended campus, and they're committing to that school, the sight unseen. So I'm hoping that for the current juniors, and we all are hopeful that it won't be that way for your current child, but virtual tours really are the way to go. Your students' information will be entered into that database. You're going to go online and you register, and the student will put in their information, and which is really important because then the student is tracked in their system. And for some schools, the small liberal arts schools, they like demonstrated interest. So that's a very important thing to do. So you can see on the slide that, for instance, that's Bucknell, and right in Naviance, they can take their current list of schools in Naviance, a student can, and go to the college website or right through Naviance and sign up for that virtual tour and info session. And we know that a lot of our seniors did virtual interviews, and Mrs. Carroll does a fabulous job of working with them for mock interviews. It's probably best if a student or the expectation that your junior is only going to do maybe 1 or 2 virtual tours a week. While we all think that juniors are really in the mindset to get this all done, they have other things on their mind at this point too. So if they could do 1 or 2 colleges a week, and then that thoughtful research could happen after each of those virtual tours, it's going to give your child time to ponder. Is this a good choice for me? Should I take this off my list? Should I add schools? Should I tell Mrs. McGann that I like this school and maybe she can find other schools that are like that in different parts of the country? It's really important to remember. And, I know we all know this, but if you ask the current seniors, they will definitely agree with this. The college application process is a marathon. It is not a sprint, and it takes a long time. Some of our seniors are still going through the process of deciding. They're on wait lists. It may continue well into May. So we really have to rely on each of your individual child's readiness to to engage in the process and where there are, but a virtual tour is a really good first step. A really positive side of this past year in this whole admissions process has been the accessibility of college admission representatives. They typically are flying across the country, visiting all the high schools, as Sue Carroll just noted, and really are on the road through November, and they have really limited time to converse with students before they head into the reading season of applications. They were sitting home in their living rooms and their offices just like we were, and so since they were grounded, they were much more responsive to emails from students asking important questions about the school. I think this will continue. I think it's a really good opportunity for our kids to connect with the school, to show their interest, to show inquisitive about it, and school counselors can really help them with that process. The college admissions landscape in some ways has changed for some schools, particularly the small to medium liberal arts schools. And they're really interested in filling all their seats in their class. So they're really interested in communicating with students. As your student moves through the process and finds institutions of interest, encourage them to enter them in Naviance. because over the summer, what will happen as Sue Carroll solidifies what the visits will be like next year, whether or not they're in person or virtual again, your child will get an invitation to that visit because they're listed in Naviance. So it's important that the schools are listed in colleges I'm thinking about. Another thing that's going to be happening soon in mid-May, school counselors are going to be starting a program with your juniors to get started on the Common Application. Our goal is to have each of your juniors create a Common Application account and begin to work through the early sections and ask questions about them. The Common App, for those of you who don't know, is most widely used application to colleges with more than 900 institutions represented. There are other applications, most frequently a college's own applications, which they can find online. But I would say that the majority of our students use the Common Application to apply to schools. I know that in our junior appointments, our counselors have really encouraged your students to start work on that over the summer and get as much done as possible. While we ask them to do that, in reality, sometimes it's hard for kids to do that. So as parents, this is something that we wanted you to be aware of, that, you know, when they land back as seniors, they're taking difficult courses, they're happy to be back, there's so much happening, and we hope next year we're all in session, and so there will be a lot happening. So the more they can get done on the Common Application over the summer, the better that it is. We always say to our students that the Common Application is not a hard thing to accomplish, but it can be very tedious with a lot of details. And we want to make sure that they take the time to complete it. The beauty is that you can do a section or two at a time. You can save it and return to it at a later time to tackle the next piece. And Sue Carroll is going to talk about the essay part of it, but there's one major essay, which is a 650-word response to a list of prompts. And we have a slide on that too. And 650 words, for those of you who don't know, is basically a one-page document. And while they're used to writing research papers and, you know, are 5 to 10 pages, for some reason, students find it difficult to talk about themselves, to speak about themselves. So they take a greater amount of time to actually work through the process of that. The essay is a story about something that happened to them, giving the admissions committee a view into who they are as a person and how they face that circumstance that they encounter. It takes the admissions committee beyond the statistics of a GPA or SAT scores, and you know, just it's an opportunity for the juniors to tell them a little bit more about themselves. And Sue will speak to that in a minute. Another thing that that juniors should be working on right now is the teacher recommendations. In the junior meetings, as you might remember, we advised your student to reach out to 2 teachers, academic teachers, to request those letters. And students are reporting that they have started this process. Sometimes juniors have a difficult time deciding who they would like to ask. They can say, oh, I don't know if I did well enough in that class. You know, does the teacher really know me? And I know it's been difficult for our juniors because it's been an unusual year and they may not feel that the teachers know them well enough. But I think that if they're having trouble deciding, they should really see their school counselor and really work things out. Teachers are very willing to write for the students. As with last year's application cycle, and particularly without any standardized test scores, teacher letters often play an important role in this whole process. Schools typically want 2 letters. The counselor letter, our letter of recommendation, is considered a separate process. So 2 academic teachers. So if a student is really trying to decide if a 3rd letter is warranted, such as from a coach or an employer, please have your child discuss that with your school counselor and determine whether or not that would be a good add value to their application process. As always, a follow-up thank you note is always appreciated to the teachers. They write these letters on their own time, and often they start them over the summer. They're doing them on their summer break. At this point, let's go back to Sue Carroll, and she's going to be speaking about mock interviews, which she did many of this year, and the college essay.
Not every school offers interviews to students, but there are a number of schools, especially small liberal arts colleges, that do offer interviews. Linda and I, right before spring break, did 4 1.5-hour workshops that were very well attended by your children. So we got them off to a good start. Most interviews happen in the fall, interviews in earnest, especially alum interviews that might be solicited by the college after the application has been sent off to them. You get an email back saying, would you like to interview with one of our alums? So I'm happy to do mock interviews with your students. They just have to send me an email. You don't have to send me the email. Your student happily can send me the email, or they can swing by my office and we will find a time to interview. Every interview has been conducted via Zoom or Google Hangout this year, and I'm not so sure that that is going to change, especially alum interviews, in any time in the near future. So again, if your student is interested in conducting a mock interview, I'm happy to do it. So they just have to contact me. As Linda mentioned, the essays for the Common App, which is the major essay, 650-word essay, they've already decided their essays for the year. They are the same as last year with one addition, and that is an essay on gratitude. And if your eyesight is so good that you actually can read the screen and you read the essay questions, you will notice that they have one thing in common, and that is that they are looking for reflections. They are asking your children to be reflective. It should be an essay that only your child can write. There is always the option of essay of your choice, but I think sometimes students find it easier to actually answer a question or address a prompt. If I could offer you one piece of advice, it was advice that I was given years ago when my own child was applying to college. A parent who had already had 4 kids go through the system, she said to me, don't read your child's college essay. Don't even ask to read it. Make sure that it's done and have them visit their English teacher and their guidance counselor. And years later, I'm happy to say my husband and I did not read those essays. We didn't try to change any language. We read them actually after our child had received acceptances into college. So I know, I think oftentimes when we read something that our child has written, we're reading it with our heart, not our style guide. So my best advice to you is make sure it's done, but advise them to use the resources in the school. Ask their English teacher to give it a once over for grammar and for style, and then bring it to their guidance counselor for the appropriateness of the essay. Our guidance counselors are very well attuned in knowing what colleges are looking for. And so that would be the best use of the student's time as far as making sure that the essay is something that they want to proudly send off to the college. This will not be the only essay they will write. Many colleges have supplemental essays. Those can usually be populated on the school's admissions website after August 1st. August 1st is a big day for applications. If the Common App goes down to spruce itself up, it comes back on after August 1st, as do college applications, their own applications. Your kids have been writing 3-paragraph essays since 3rd grade. So this really is not as daunting as they might think it is. What probably is the most daunting thing is finding the topic. Again, there are topics already pointed out in the essays themselves, but your guidance counselor would be happy to help your student, help them pick out a topic for their essay. So that brings us to, last but not least, the summer mailing. Cindy?
Sure, and you can show the last slide there, Ari, where we just give you some of the important links, and we will be sharing this PowerPoint when we post it to talk about, you know, just the scholarships, testing, the fairtest.org is for test optional schools, which is a very large and always changing list. And the scholarships, and also in Naviance, we keep a lot of our scholarship information there as well. So there's a number of places that you can look for information around that. We do want to do a shout out to social media. We post, or at least Sue Carroll posts, a lot of articles around college admissions every week. And just as you're diving into this, a lot of this will be so pertinent to what you are thinking about and considering and wanting to do for to help with your children. Those articles usually are really spot on. So do look at our social media things. And then Sue Carroll did talk about a college essay writing workshop that's held in the summer, and that'll be a virtual one, right?
Yeah, I don't actually think I mentioned it. I'm also a New Canaan resident, and I bet everyone found this past week in their mailbox. And this is the link to the summer enrichment programs offered by New Canaan Public Schools, one of which is a very reasonably priced college essay workshop that actually will be, I think, in person this year. It's run by Darren Bruce, which is the district's writing specialist. And it is a great way for a student to start the college application essay process. And it is held probably the week after school ends. I think June 21st it starts. But that information is found at the New Canaan Public Schools Summer Enrichment website.
Okay, thank you. Over the summer, you'll be receiving, usually we send it out August. You'll be receiving summer letters, something we actually still send. I don't know that we'll do electronically, but I think we still send them by paper. It's a parent brag sheet, more or less, that we ask you to talk about and tell us about your child from your perspective. These tend to be so useful for the counselors when we're writing your child's recs, to understand your child in full context of their lives. Our letters talk about them at school, and oftentimes there are family dynamics that come into play that has impacted them. So we love to get from you your perspective on things. So please take some time with that. There will also be a form for your child to fill out, a student profile. These all are important pieces as we move forward into the fall and look to writing our letters on behalf of your children to do the best we can with that. So keep that in mind as well. That's all we have. I'm going to answer some of the questions here as we go, as have come up. I think on the slide with the SATs and ACTs, a couple of people were asking about the May. I think we were just looking at what you could still register for, which would have been the June one. The May, yes, May SAT is going as planned, but the June, and the other one was, are we having the June one here? Yes, right, Sue, we do hold it. We forgot to put the asterisk next to that, but that will be okay.
Our apologies. May and June are both here at the high school.
Right. Okay. So questions. Let's see. How will Naviance work with students who did not have test scores? Will that be noted on the scattergrams? It is not noted on the scattergrams that we were hoping Naviance would offer some opportunity for us to be able to display that, but that has not been true. So that will make some of those statistics a little wonky this year, and I'm going to have to take a look at that. What you have up there is 3 years of data on the scattergrams. So you will see that there's still a lot of information there. Your child will have to plot themselves according to GPA as to where they fall if they haven't tested at all.
Cindy, I'm just going to jump in and say goodbye. I have to go. I will leave you in very, very good hands, parents. Thank you all, and continue.
Thanks, Ari.
Okay.
Bye, Ari.
And there was a question, I had talked about ED and looking at the school's average requirements for the school.